I'm on the fence about this current obsession with not only just video games, but everything about bringing up the past and kind of like remastering it. But I can kind of put this bias aside and say that Owlboy was definitely a very solid and enjoyable experience. The game has a lot of charm and character, but 9 years of development sort of left the game with what I believe to be like cohesive sort of issues that stop the game from obtaining this whole classic status that a lot of people I have seen actually at least give the game. So let's dive into it. Let's dive into the story. You control this owl-human hybrid named Otis, and along with him is paired with, I believe, 3 main supporting characters. This is gonna be a very spoil-free review. So, basically, you're fighting against these pirates who are attacking your town, and you're both trying to gather these relics. You obviously for good, them for evil. It unfolds nicely. The pacing sort of, decently throughout the game. Except at the end, it's just like hits you very hard, which I believe actually is a good thing. Endings should be more intense than the overall story. The story should lead you a nice, like, solid pacing that builds up and then towards the end just goes off. But still, overall, like, the whole story is nothing special. Like, it's a good versus evil. You gotta gather something. It's been done a lot. It's not horribly done though. Like, a cliche story can either be horribly done or it can just be okay. This is just okay, in my opinion. There's a couple issues though I have with sort of the specifics of the game. I don't like mute characters. The main character doesn't talk throughout the game. And I know I'm gonna make references because this game is definitely trying to emulate specific game Zelda, and I have issues with that too. I didn't like that Link was mute. I don't like that he's mute either. And to kind of piggyback on that, I don't like calling them owls. I don't know why. Like, it just seems like you could have just made up a new kind of like name for this group of people. I don't know. It seemed awkward. It seemed like this is what I was talking about earlier with like the whole 9-year development and like the kind of awkward kind of things. It's that it just seems like maybe they didn't know what to call them. I don't know. So to recap, they have a lot of good main characters that are really fleshed out and likable. The ending, while it didn't have such great parts overall, it was very exciting and enthralling. Supporting and minor characters aren't really important, and they're not fleshed out at all, and they're pretty boring, and you forget about them. And at the end of the day, the story is just not something special. It's nothing special at all. So for gameplay, said you control Otis, and what I like about it is the supporting characters are sort of used as weapons. They're not just like running along with you or flying along with you and, doing their own thing. You're controlling them while you're controlling yourself as well. I feel as if this was definitely done before, but it still feels unique to me. I can't think about what game this has been done with, but I enjoyed it. I really thought it was great. It's not utilized though as well as it should. Again, I'm not going to spoil the game or say any specifics, but I will say that you use one of the characters way more than the others. And for certain parts though, you will use the other characters, but strictly just them. I feel as if this could have been, smoothed out a little bit. It seems like something that isn't actually that hard. It's kind of like that awkward kind of fragmentation idea I was talking about earlier. But another thing I don't like either is how limited the game feels. You're supposed to be like this flying creature, and like the game's beautiful, but you're kind of stuck on this, XY axis. There's no depth to it like a Zelda game. So it just feels like kind of like this whole, you want to explore this world, but there's not really also that much to explore. There's pretty much just the main town area, and then it branches off into the dungeons that you go to, and then you get into these dungeons, and you're kind of like stuck inside. So it's kind of just like you have this beautiful idea, and you're just limiting yourself so hard. I don't know. It's still enjoyable, but it's clearly it could have been better. So So to recap, having characters as abstract weapons, like an idea, like an abstract weapon, is really unique feeling. When the whole kind of three Trinity supporting characters are done well, it's greatly executed. The map's very linear and bland, and the dungeons are pretty easy, and the lack of any substantial side quests leaves you with almost like zero replayability. Now the graphics. This is what the game is very hyped up for. You'll like go to any review or talk anything about it. People say this is the best looking 2D game of all time, and I agree. The style brings a lot of old like Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis with like very nice modern effects. So this is like a style that's called high-bit games recently. It takes old and then builds upon it with new. And it kind of just shows how this wasn't a limitation. It's just a style. So in this world though, it's very charming. A lot of the character sprites are great. Some of the locations they obviously spent more time on than others. There's some places that are very memorable. Some are just really bland and boring. And they're great from beginning to end. There is no issues of like the long development time with this specific part. Each part of the game is beautiful though. They just went all out throughout the entire time on these graphics. I would not be surprised if that was what they mainly spent their whole time doing. So this ultimately though depends. I know a lot of people didn't like this style, but that's up to you. So overall, I would say for me personally, the graphics are hand down just beautiful. And it's very charming and unique looking. My negatives are they're stuck indoors like almost the whole time, and half the dungeons I could say are really uninspired. So now for sound, I don't really have much negatives to say. It's a great mix of chiptune with like orchestral scores. And I actually really enjoy the mix of new and old with this kind of style. I think more so than the graphics. There's not a whole lot of music or sound effects throughout the game, or I should say like voice sound effects. But when there are, like they are presented, it's very appropriate. And the only thing I could just say is that sometimes the characters will say things, but I feel that could have been utilized a little bit better. But overall, though, I have no issues really with the sound. It's probably my favorite part of the game, I would say. So overall, the standard for like mixing old and modern, I like it. I hope that a lot of games utilize chiptune a lot more in games. And when they do use the sound and music, it's very appropriate. I will say there are a couple songs on the soundtrack that are just meh. You know, they're not bad, but they're not fantastic. And some more voice acting wouldn't have hurt in terms of like the sound effects for the characters. Overall, I would say Owlboy's a pretty good overall experience that could have been great, but there's a lot of just awkward issues throughout the game that stop it from being great. The flight mechanic and the controls feel solid, but then you realize you're stuck in this sort of linear, bland kind of environment that could have been fleshed out more if they would have added this sort of like Link to the Past depth in terms of just being on like an XY axis. I'm not sold on this whole trend of like high-bit games, but I think that Owlboy really did it well. And it seems like it was hinted that there will be a sequel. If they can fix these issues, I think that overall, it'll be better. I would say that, like with that issue fixed of just being kind of limited to indoors, and also be able to roam free a little bit more, not be open world completely, but just to branch out a little bit more. I think that will fix any issues that I have with the game at all, and it will make the game fantastic overall. For now, it's just great though. I do recommend picking it up right now. At the time of this review, it's only $25, so it's not like you're like buying out this fully fledged $60 game. And I think for like the 7.5 hours of enjoyment you'll get from this game, it's completely worth it.